Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Madvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So today's subject is the essentials of spiritual life. And so a few definitions have to be there. It's a bit like if you want to create some kind of product of cookery, then ingredients are necessary. What are the essential ingredients in spiritual life? Now, with any subject, of course, we need to clarify some definitions, what we mean by spiritual, what we mean by life, and the combination of these two terms, what is spiritual life? And in order to explore that, I suppose we have to explore and really understand, not just theoretically, but practically speaking, what does it mean to have a purpose in life, and do we have such a thing? Is there a certain direction toward which we should be cultivating our life? Just as if you set out on a journey, you know you have the correct equipment, a car is there, but you have some idea of what is the goal in life. What is the destiny to which you are going? And some idea, what is the route that you will take? So some planning has to be there, some itinerary has to be defined. So is there such a thing in spiritual life? Is there some kind of journey that we have to take? Is there a destiny that is known? And very often we don't think of these things because we grow up in a set of increasingly complex circumstances, and all of our purposes and goals become suitable for that period of time, that period of our life. As a child grows up, maybe their goal is to do away with all their teeth. I've seen some 3-4-year-olds delight in the fact that they've lost some teeth. They show some beautiful gums, and they're very proud of it. And what helps, I suppose, in that great, great joy will be a parent's myth that comes in. If you lose a tooth, you can put it under your pillow, we'll get a coin. There's a tradition like that. So the goals of small children are very simple. And as we grow in life, we become much more complex. I think it was Bertrand Russell who said that seems the thrust of modern education is to completely lose and do away with our inherent creativity. Think of the great innocence of a child, full of dependency. It has nothing to do but gurgle. No doubt a child, a small newly born baby, is the boss in a household. It cries, everybody runs. It soils itself, everybody runs. It's hungry, everybody runs. And this childhood state is not really philosophically tabula rasa, that is, a blank sheet. It comes with certain characteristics that unfold as a child develops on the one side. On the other side, it is influenced by the external demands of the environment. And so as a child grows, we find increasing intelligence, increasing curiosity. Above all, more curiosity than what the adult has. But there's no doubt there's an innocence in the child. And part of the innocence is a sense of dependency. Many, many people in their adult life, faced with all kinds of difficulties and problems, wish that they could just go back to childhood days, days of sunshine and joy, running through the grass on sunny days, experiencing the imaginary world of daydreaming, playing with imaginary characters, with imaginary scripts, how simple life was, hearing the wind through the grass, thinking that there is some entity that occupies the grass and it is whispering to us. Today's thought was illustrating that. Looking at the blue, blue sky, a child will ask, why is the sky blue? Even adults will ask this question. Of course, there's a basic scientific reason for it. The sky is blue because the spectrum of light presented to us presents a shorter wavelength and appears to the eye as blue. We screen out all the other wavelengths and catch this one wavelength dominating, and it reflects in the water as well. And because of this, we feel that we like blue because it gives us a sense of infinity. Well, that's the scientific explanation and the psychological explanation also of why. But you see, a child won't think in this way. And if we are clever at parenting, we'll steer a child's mind toward more beautiful, deeper values. Not necessarily literally true, but things that appeal to a child's imagination and sense of joy. And a mother may say, oh, this blueness is actually the Lord of the universe, your own protector. And that is his skin there, giving a child a sense of the universality of existence. And so spiritual life for a child has a certain dependency on the education that the adult provides. A parent teaches a child mainly by example, but also by the sweet words and the imaginative capacity that a parent has to see things in a different way and then present them to a child on their wavelength so that they easily understand or more easily understand. So when we are presented with this question, the essentials of spiritual life, one essential will have to be, we have to get back to the simple view, perhaps, of a child. In other words, we have to strip away as many of the complexities as we possibly can without stripping away rationale, and come back to a shifted understanding of how we view the universe. The universe as presented to us is not such a happy place. And we have to react to it as best we can. Our own reaction will come from the unconscious area, the unconscious level. And so when we talk about the first principles of life, there must be a strong desire for an established purpose or to achieve an established purpose. What is our purpose in life? We have to be absolutely convinced of this. Now, naturally, we can use the car analogy, and if we say that there is a goal when we engage in a travel, that we know what our destination will be, and we know the method of travel. So, what is our destiny? And religion presents us with some aspects suitable for a childish understanding. It's not bad, but we have to grow out of our childhood stage in terms of our understanding. Without losing our childlike nature, we have to make sure we don't lapse into childishness. Now, most people are living in the unconscious area. Most people are simply acting and reacting to the circumstances around them. And this is obscuring our central purpose. The question is there something enduring? Is there something that survives beyond physical death? Is there something that doesn't change amidst all the changing things? These are the deep philosophical questions, but to bring them out of the intellectual area, we have to employ our feelings about it. Is there some permanent state where we can be completely happy, completely joyful, completely content, completely steady, something beyond the portrayed material paradise that religions or some religions may portray at the childish level? If you ask, what is your goal? My goal is a heaven. What should be there? Whatever is not here. What here we find misery. We find when we eat too much, we get a stomachache. But I heard in heaven we can eat as much as we like and no stomachache. Wonderful. And what will be the food? What's your favorite food? Oh, I love fruit and ice cream. Oh, inexhaustible amounts in heaven. No tummy ache. Nor do you get fat. No doctors are there. No need for them. So these kind of portrayals will be presented to the childish mind even in adulthood. And if we stick there, then we won't go anywhere. What are the answers to these questions? It's in your interior. It's within. You have to take an interior journey. The so-called normal human journey will be an exterior journey. Just like going in a car and finding out a destination. In that same way, we have to look within. The culmination of spirituality, in terms of its methodology, would have to be meditation. Meditation gives you direct access to the interior, the most interior, the heart of your hearts, the soul of your soul. That would be your destiny. That will be the journey you have to take. And so when you talk about essentials of the interior journey, first of all, nature has a way of doing this. It gives us a pinching moment. Not just one, but many of them. It makes life uncomfortable for us. And we can make a choice about it. Katha Upanishad and the Bhagavad Gita give us a very clear understanding of what is presented to us. Two avenues are there, two roads are there. A choice is there. You can go this way or you can go that way. The capacity in a mature way to evaluate which path we should take is no doubt a first step. We ask, is it much more beneficial to us to go this way? Or more beneficial to us to go that way? You may say there's an egocentric position. So be it. What is the practical benefit? What is the overall benefit? Now, if we orientate ourselves in the external way, then our reward becomes pleasure, in other words, a delight to the senses. But this is a physical level. And a physical level is understood because our consciousness is at that physical level. Can we raise the consciousness to another level? So some people feel their delight is in eating and drinking and sense pleasures. Bearing in mind that at the human level, there is a fine dividing line between the human brute and the animal. And how is it that the human gave birth as a human, not as an animal? If we sustain the animalistic aspect of ourselves, no doubt, our next birth will be at that level, a regression, not a progression. It's a very, very rare thing after many, many lives, many births, to come to this evolutionary position of man. And nature is our great school. Nature has a way of prodding us and pushing us so that we raise to higher and higher levels. And don't think that the brute is somebody from the Amazon jungle. Some of the tribes that haven't changed for maybe thousands and thousands of years, that have been left alone, that don't know any other existence, are sometimes more pure in their thoughts, in their words, in their deeds, in their compassion, in their sociability, in their social concern, than other people in collar and tie, waging war on the battlefield and destroying thousands of their fellow humans. So we should not judge a person's primitive state by the physicality of the person. How much in tune tribes, for example, in the Amazon jungle and so on, and in Africa too, how close they are in understanding the gifts that nature presents, how to use it, how to make a great deal of nature as a resource, how to manufacture something useful because nature is then well understood. Nature is understood in all its aspects, and tuning into that nature. What is the difference between tuning into that nature and tuning into God? Our Vedanta philosophy says, actually, not much difference. Nature is a manifested aspect of it. Only one thing is there. And so in spiritual life, this awareness, this increasing awareness of oneness is an essential step. In terms of what are the qualifications for a spiritual aspirant, we can see very clearly in our Vedanta philosophy, several things are necessary. 4 categories of things are necessary. But the most fundamental aspect will be what is called mumukshutvam, a great, great longing for freedom. It's already in us. It's just misdirected. It's an intense longing of the student to free himself or herself. How to do that? Through the knowledge of the innermost interior of themselves. And of course, when they find it in themselves, they also find it everywhere. It's not something locked up. It's not something special to you alone. And so the knowledge of the true self will also be a release from all our fetters and bondages, the things that are causing restrictions to our freedom. And they're pertaining to the body and the mind and the ego. They're bondages that are created by our ignorance. We have misunderstood what the truth is. Now, a child, on the one hand, accepts everything and drinks in like a sponge everything. Imagine learning a new language in a mere 2 years. Every child does it, more or less. Every child learns a new language in adulthood, particularly as you get older. Ask a person, please learn a new language. They'll struggle. They'll have to be hooked on grammar constructions and all of these kinds of things. A child doesn't think like that. A child listens. A child copies. A child imitates. If we want to learn a new language, probably the best way is to live amongst the people whose language it is. Here in Ireland, where the Irish language has diminished quite significantly over the years, increasingly, many students who want to learn go to the Gaeltacht and live there. They have to accept the variation of the accent there, of course, no doubt. But that is the best way to learn. If I had time, maybe I would do that. Take Brian along with me, maybe. Go to the Gaeltacht and say, okay, don't speak anything other than Irish to me, and I will be forced to pick it up. But we pick it up through nouns, through identifying, not with the verbal connections. But then the verbal connections start coming. So we start learning our grammar, or at least our vocabulary. We start learning table, chair, this, that. And then we start learning the links between them. And then we start learning the refinements of past, present, and future, all the tenses and so on. And then we start learning, but already we've learned it in a conversational way. Every child does this. When they go to school, they start learning the written version of it. So this great longing has to be there. Anything in life that you ever got was not just a mere desire. It was a great longing for it. And even in our childhood, we have this. Even for a small, simple thing. A child taken to an amusement park, seeing other children eating ice cream on a summer's day, will nag the mother and the father. Oh, there'll be an internal longing for this external thing. And there'll be a sadness that goes with it. I haven't got it. Now, in adulthood, it translates into other things, that's all. We long for all kinds of things. Supposing we transmute that sense of longing into an interior longing, a longing for truth. This would be the most fundamental step in spiritual life. And if we haven't got it, and we are devotees, we should pray for it. We should pray for it intensely. We should say, I haven't got you. I don't know you. I'm just your child, but grant me a longing for you. And the more we long for that interior entity that religion calls God, that philosophy calls truth, that enduring thing, that yoga calls that interior self, that interior fundamental life monad, the more we long for that, the less we become disturbed by the external worlds and its circumstances. A restless mind, we shouldn't confuse this with a restless mind. The longing is completely different from restlessness. Restlessness is an inferior aspect of the mind. A restless mind shows a lack of self-control, and that would be the next essential thing, that if we really want to fulfill our longing, then we have to bring about some control. Control does not mean repression. Self-control means taking stock of something which is an instrument. We don't normally value that. We value the body as ourself, my nose, my this. Despite the language, we are still embodying ourselves. We are still identifying ourselves with something which is intrinsically external. We don't normally think that the body is external to us, and yet it is external to the fundamental life entity, the fundamental spirit. So we have to cultivate some virtues, there's no doubt. In fact, a restless mind shows this lack of self-control and also a lack of firm belief in the existence of truth. So going back again, don't forget, establishing a purpose is establishing the truth. Understanding that there's more to this life than mere getting up in the morning, breakfast, work, going to bed, and repeating the process again, and suffering losses and difficulties, and all the tragedies of life, and highlighting those. And the mind is receptive. The mind, left by itself, without any central control, will continue wandering and meandering in its restless way. We have to give it some direction. And when we give it some direction, we get some peace of mind. Now, the role of parents for children is extremely important in this. There are many, many modern techniques, or there were certainly modern techniques that say, let's give a child their freedom, is equivalent to saying, let's give this child a sense of insecurity. If you take all the boundaries, behavioral boundaries away from a child, they have no direction. It means they feel they can get whatever they want. So there have to be a series of rewards and withholding of them. These are the common motivations that we have. That has to be gradually replaced by the interior longing, the internal longing. We have to take all these emotions and steer them within. And it is no good waiting for your deathbed to do it. I'll attend to spiritual life later. Let me enjoy life first. By that time, the habit level has been saturated with adverse values. So we have to not only do that, but we have to be the supreme example of the virtues that we are expecting a child to cultivate until they get a sense of good citizenship by themselves, that it is necessary to act in a socially healthy way, cooperative way, ultimately a loving way, a self-sacrificing way. Every child should be encouraged to be a world mover. You may say this is all to do with secular life. No. If you understand the central purpose, all life is spiritual. There is no such thing as secular life. There is a secular category of it. That's all. But what we call normal, so-called secular life is just the part of the journey toward a destination, toward freedom. That is our destiny. Restlessness, of course, creates confusion. And without the self-control, we'll get it. It endows the mind with an intense one-pointedness if we control it. This concentration and self-control enables the mind to pierce through the thick crust of layers and layers and layers of ignorance. In yogic language, this is an unfolding, an interior unfolding of the various levels of consciousness mentioned previously in previous talks. The yogic language for it is beautifully descriptive. With every layer, interior layer of opening is like a flower opening, turning its head up toward the sun, increasingly opening, increasingly getting nearer the purity of truth. So purity of mind requires a longing for it. Purity of mind then, based on the longing and driven by the longing, will happily engage in a sense of self-control. Renunciation and the longing for freedom, these are really the cardinal virtues through which the other virtues bear fruit. So renunciation, otherwise called vairagya, means I don't value this body and this world as I used to value it. And I know that whatever action takes place, the rewards, the fruits of it, do not belong to me. I have no right to them. My joy is to work in the vineyard, not to drink the fruits of it. But if I drink the fruits, then a sense of gratitude arises as me. And that is a wonderful spiritual quality, always being thankful. Taking the example of the blue sky again, we can look at the blue sky. We don't have to change it. We don't have to do anything more to it. We don't have to deepen the color. We simply stand and drink the scene in and allow the interior emotional reaction to it, which is one of a sense of beauty, a sense of aesthetics. I don't know if any other creature has that. The human mind's response to beauty and aesthetics comes in a higher state of consciousness, away from the body, away from the emphasis on the physicality, and goes more to the cultural, so that we can understand now the aesthetic sense of beauty that results in institutions such as museums, art galleries, musical concerts, the wonderful response, universal response in all humanity to musical notes. There's a deep reason for it. It shifts our feelings. It shifts us a gear upwards. Of course, it can also shift a gear downwards. Art can also do the same. So we take the aesthetic value and use it. How should we use it? We should use it as an expression of the ultimate beauty. What makes things beautiful? The essence of beauty itself. And the human has a response to that, because that inner beauty is deep in your interior. It is part and parcel of you. There is no other thing which is there. When you discover it through an increasing unfoldment, through meditation, then you'll find it. Even the great Shankaracharya, famed for his emphasis of non-dualistic philosophy, Advaita philosophy, and yet he sees things differently from his grand teacher Gaudapada, who's looking at things from the position of the absolute unmanifest Brahman. Shankaracharya is looking at it from the manifested portion. But even he is laying great emphasis on the cultivation of bhakti, devotion. He feels that it is supremely necessary to the attainment of freedom. Bhakti, single-minded zeal, unswerving passion for the realization of truth. So this control comes automatically, almost, without any struggle, effortlessly, if you will, from this inner sense of beauty that comes with shifting the emotions in a more positive way. Everybody can do it. Everybody should do it. Because, as you know, going back to the example of a child, all these emotions come up with a child: despair, disappointment when longing is not accomplished. Tears flow. Humiliation can flow also from a child's script. And all these reactions get replayed in adulthood if there is no self-control. Self-control really is the very core of the Vedantic disciplines. It's the very core of all religious disciplines. Without it, of course, we can have no real progress in spiritual life. So by means of this self-control, control of the body and control of the engine of the mind's worldly concerns, contents. What makes for impurity? Impurity means that we have different concerns. Our worldliness, if you will, our concern with what is in front starts occupying the mind, starts confusing it, starts giving us stress. The Bhagavad Gita in the 15th chapter will give us this wonderful text. Mavaivam so jiva loke jiva bhutaha sanatanaha manaha shashtani indriyani prakritashtani karshati. An eternal portion of myself, says Krishna, having become the embodied soul in this world of living beings, draws to itself the senses and the mind as the sixth, which are in nature called Prakriti. Forgetfulness of this fact is called impurity. We become impure and ignorant when we forget this fact. Ignorance and impurity are the same thing. Ignorance is denoted by adjectives: darkness, cloudiness, lack of clarity, confusion, pain. In the Sankhya language, tamas, implying inertia, darkness, ignorance. An eternal portion of myself, imagine how beautiful that is. This world is an eternal portion of myself, and what are we? An eternal portion of myself, having become, we have become, this eternal portion of myself has become the embodied soul. And in the world of other living beings who have the same history, and in doing this, not only as the body, but draws to itself the senses, the way of relating to the world as a kind of game, and the mind as the sixth sense. What a wonderful thing. Who am I? I'm an angel that was waiting in a lift before I was born, waiting for a certain destiny, a certain set of instructions, coming into the world, delightfully playing my part in the game. What is knowledge when I know that really I'm an eternal portion of the divine, that have come down temporarily to play my part and relate to other living beings in a wonderful dance of life and go back to my home, go back to my point of origin, my blissful base. We should remind ourselves of this constantly. This is our purpose, this is our destiny, to understand this, to remove the layers of ignorance. And in doing that, what is the practical application of it? We remove all our sorrow, all our pain. What is the further practicality of this? We remove that for others also. Now, self-control should be really distinguished from the practice of mortification. We find many, many examples of many well-meaning holy people, saints in different cultures, different religions, saying, we need to mortify the body. And this is from a distorted theology that says, I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving, I'm a sinner, basically. I should feel guilty. Christ hung on the cross, and I should feel guilty about it because he did it for our sins. And once we feel guilty and remorseful about it and accept this fact, then Christ's blood washes us to purity. The Vedantic position is not like this at all. Is there any value in that? There is some value in it, yes. But ultimately, there has to be a further investigation, a further understanding of our reality. This interior journey will open things up. It will replace some of these beginning points of view. And so it doesn't mean this mortification or this meaningless austerity, this self-punishment, self-deprivation is very different from self-torture. Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita condemns this point of view in the Bhagavad Gita. Self-control really means the development of willpower. That's what it means. Can we be strong? Can we cultivate the virtue of strength? And with this strength, now strength is different from stubbornness. Stubbornness is a product of egocentricity. But we have enormous potential behind us. Our potentiality is unlimited. Our possibilities are infinite. As I have mentioned before, if we had a vision in a statement for our era Vedanta society, I would say that infinite possibilities, just these two words, it is an opportunity, a place where we can explore our infinite possibilities, exercise our true talents, explore our inner strength and exert it in a whole beautiful product of willpower, a current of willpower. Willpower is strengthening. It's the strengthening of the determinative faculty. And it is this determinative faculty itself, really, that requires our purity. The determinative faculty that we call buddhi controls all the sense organs. And the sense organs controls the body. And control of this also controls the environment. And of course, in the Kathopanishad that we have studied previously in the Bhagavad Gita, we have this illustration of the parable of the chariot. The body being compared to a chariot. Modern language, a car, the earth car. And inside it, what is the occupant? It is the self, the internal self, the divine, the infinite invisible sitting there as the person in control, the controller, the inner controller. This is the expression from the Upanishads, interior controller. The senses are the external things that want to wander in many different directions. It creates confusion. Imagine now, if you were traveling to a certain destination and somebody tells you of all the possible roads you can travel and you should try and travel on them all simultaneously, it's not going to work. And so, when we use the analogy of a chariot or a car, we're implying there's a destination. There's one road. There's one road for us we should qualify. And in order to take our destination seriously, we have to exert our mastery over it. We have to strengthen our will. So all of these disciplines, many of them mentioned in chapter 17 of the Bhagavad Gita, as tapasya of the body, austerity of the body, austerity of speech, austerity of the mind, all of these really are designed to strengthen the will. The graphic description is not the weakening of the mind in the senses through self-mortification and abstinence. It's not deprivation and degradation of oneself. It's the complete opposite. It's the actual direct opposite of it. So this many examples of this self-control are given to us. One great favorite example of this self-control and what happens if we don't exert it will be the story, of course, of Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra, the great administrator who ultimately, the great king who ultimately really became a great rishi, to the extent that when he enjoins sacrifices in the forest, he used to have the capacity to combat any of the elements, the evil elements that were disrupting his sacrifices. But he was unable to do anything. He had to engage military people to do it. Rama and Lakshmana had to be brought in to help him in this way. But he began as a warrior, as a king, being entertained by Vasishta. The story starts. And in doing that, greed and power overtakes him. And he desires the source of Vasishta's wealth. We can learn many, many lessons from the story of Vishwamitra. He was a ruler, he was a military genius. And we know that he visited this hermitage of Vasishta. And of course, the sage wanted to honor the king by providing him with sumptuous feast. And his soldiers and even his animals were all granted. But Vishwamitra expressed the source of all this divine grace flowing. It was as a result of an ever-giving cow, the cow of plenty, Sabhala. Sabhala was blessed with divine accomplishments. By her sheer will, she quickly produced all these various items of food, soldiers, whatever was required. But you see, it was Vishwamitra's latent greed that spoiled it all. And the next morning, after sumptuous feast, he wanted to have the cow for himself. And when Vasishta refused to part with her, then Vishwamitra ordered his soldiers to come and just take possession. We can see modern day versions of this. If something is denied, just go and invade a country and cause mayhem there. It is all really out of a sense of greed and power, not out of a sense of social good. Now the cow was left to her own resources, wasn't helped at all, but with equal speed, she created herself voluntarily regiments after regiments that routed out Vishwamitra's soldiers. And so this thwarted greed has a consequence. It turned into uncontrolled anger, uncontrolled fury. That is what happens in human life with an uncontrolled mind. It starts off with a desire for something externally. And when that is denied us, it ends in fury. How close it is to a child's behavior. I can't have that ice cream, so let me stamp and perform until the parent yields. So it results in anger. And the king hurled weapon after weapon upon the kind host Vasishta out of his thwarted greed and therefore consequential fury. And Vasishta had in his hand his Brahma Danda, his staff given by cosmic mind. It was a rod which had irresistible spiritual power, because all power is spiritual. You may think that you have your own power and strength. No, it is all supplied and not acknowledged. That's the generosity of the supplier. And all weapons that Vishwamitra had were instantly swallowed. Danda, rod, stick. And the heat generated by the flaming missiles made the hermits of the colony, including the disciples of Vasishta, and even animals and birds, run away elsewhere like a tsunami of power. They run away in hundreds to their safety. The ultimate weapon, this Brahma Shastra, was used as a last resort. But that too was consumed by the Brahma Danda. Totally worsted, the disillusioned king exclaimed, "Oh shame! Military strength is no strength at all," was his final conclusion. Spiritual strength is real strength. And by this, by that one Brahma Danda, all my weapons were swallowed up. So, what is our value as students in learning the lessons from these stories? Well, we can take a special note of the important lesson from these ancient days that mankind has repeatedly witnessed the inevitable. The inevitable is the ultimate destruction of everything built up by injustice and violence. Yet even now, so truth will run with triumph in all the circumstances. Any war will not last long. Even the First World War was only 4 years old. And the Second World War, again, a small period of time, against the background of history. But even now, when new weapons are got ready, nuclear weapons, the proud possessors assume that their bloodstained gains will remain unshaken. There is a universal justice, a cosmic mind that adjusts things differently. And so for those who rely on divine grace, ever flowing, and themselves, divine grace in the story represented by this cow of plenty, they deserve prosperity. They deserve all the good and abundant things that grace has to deliver. And it is the Lord himself, that Supreme himself, who appears as prosperity. Not deliverer of prosperity, but as prosperity. And as also, of course, the means of achieving it. And then, of course, in our spiritual life, we have to understand that this engagement of tapas is to do with gifts, to do with worship, is also to do with food control, is also to do with speech and thought. I don't know if you remember the example I gave. Somebody thinks that thought is outside our scope. But thought, of course, is a wave. And a wave has a suction of capacity. It will draw all these corresponding things into your area. Be careful what you think. And the example I gave was of the footballer who was about to be sent off the field. And it was an unjust decision by the referee. I'm sure I told you the story before. And the referee calls a prayer and presents him with a disciplinary yellow card. And the whole of the crowd, even the opposition players, see the injustice of this. And the player challenges and said, what would you do now? See all of these people supporting me. What would you do if I called you a complete idiot? Then I would take out my red card. I would command you to leave the field. I would throw you away, throw you off. All right. What would happen if I thought you were a complete idiot? Well, the referee says, nothing much I can do. In that case, says the player, I think you're a complete idiot. So you see, you can't hide your thoughts actually. Thoughts itself will become effective. We have to cultivate our virtues so that they settle down on the habit level. And the only real way of doing this is to understand the varieties of waves that are coming through the mind, divided into these gunas, repeatedly told, sattva, rajas, and tamas. You have to sportfully, completely, always tune the mind constantly into the glory of the inner self or God. Pure and self-control life is what we want to engage in. It is essential. It starts off with parenting. It starts off with there, it goes on to the ethos in schools, the control that is necessary. But we have to transcend fear and reward. We have to engage in a self-motivating kind of approach with a sporting attitude. We have to have a sense of surrender. We have to open ourselves to divine grace that flows in the form of scripture, guru, and all the other resources which are there. And the original guru will be God himself. We have to surrender like a child. We have to be childlike. We have to take on the childlike simplicity that we mentioned before of how we value the sky and how we value life as a kind of playground. Vivekananda put it in a slightly different way, our gymnasium where we gain our strength. Our first principle in spiritual life is have a childlike attitude of self-surrender, a strong desire for our freedom, a strong desire for God. But you see, as that grows, we don't adopt an independent attitude that we will go our own way, we also have to continue this simple self-surrender, this opening, this grace, and at the same time maintain the increasing strength from self-discipline and self-control. Surrendering ourselves in thought, word, and deed, registering all this to another party, and at the same time maintaining our inner control. And to do this, we have to be watchful. Constant awareness has to be there of what is going in through the mind. The mental field has to be constantly assessed. Repression is not part of this. We have to see what is coming up. We can allow it a few seconds. We can allow it to come and go. Old friends from the past that had some use. Anger had a use, perhaps, until we learn to control it. And all these old childhood friends will start coming up from the unconscious area, the habit level. Allow them a little freedom. Allow them a certain compassion. Come if you want. Stay if you can. Go if you must. I recognize you from long ago, but you weren't useful to me, and you're not useful to me now, and I have new friends to play with. I have new values of strength and beauty, goodness, love, and harmony. Come, let us come. In this way, by allowing a few seconds and then saturating the mind with love of God, with all the emotional energy that we previously had directed outward, we now direct it inward. That doesn't mean to say that we ignore the external world. No, it is also an inward movement. We see the inner dimension within the external world. We see there the source of all things flowing through every hand and heart and eye and head, through every limb. So we have to extend this. And we have to be careful not to judge examples based on the external show of them. We have to engage in suitable role models, but we have to make sure that these are not external material models. Particularly young people, people in their teenagehood, can take role models through the social media as maybe singers, or maybe actors, or maybe people in public life, such as in the sporting field, maybe boxers. And then everybody knows what their life looks like. It is a sad thing that world leaders today can be of the most depraved moral character, and yet if they're good at economics, they are supported. This moral character, what happened? Are we not seeing these leaders for a number of leadership qualities? Not only in a country will they have to have a knowledge of the social problems presented in the country, not only will they have to have natural leadership qualities, not only will they have to have an understanding of finances and economics, world affairs and diplomacy and all of these other things, but should they not also have the highest moral character? Should they not be a model? Should their leadership not really be because of these moral characteristics? Have we lost our way in this world? And yet really the highest model for a child will be those who have a spirit of generosity, a spirit of service, those who have no egocentric attitudes, those who genuinely have compassion, those who want to uplift society, not because they're in a career of politics, but because they feel for the other. Look at this movement that Swami Vivekananda made, going away from religious standards and norms as a priority and saying, no, my heart is moved by God embodied. I don't find God in bricks and mortar. I find him in flesh and blood. Is there not something we can do? This heart spilling over, heart of compassion, is such a wonderful spiritual quality. It is in fact the highest spiritual quality. having attained a level of freedom, that exuberance flows over as a spirit of service and compassion for others, and goes even further, has a penetrating vision toward the divine that sits behind, so that it becomes a worship. All social service then becomes not merely a corrective thing. Corrective thing will have its limitations, but it'll have a depth behind it. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Why? Thy neighbor is thyself. Thy neighbor is the God. Thy neighbor is that kingdom of heaven within. What is all the scriptures to do with Christianity? It's to do with gospels, good news. Good news about what? About the interiority of things, about that kingdom that sits within. And so spiritual life really will have to be a shift in consciousness. We will have to center our life in a different way. We all have a center of consciousness, but it depends where that center of consciousness is that will reflect on your level of harmony and your level of joy. If you shift your consciousness away from the exterior to a higher dimension on the interior, then you get closer to this aspiration of joy and harmony and peace that the whole of humanity aspires for. And ultimately, releasing and revealing and flowering, bursting forth in this realization of your own freedom. This is our purpose, this is our destiny, and these are steps in spiritual life that are essential to us. So with these few words, we leave off there. So, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace be unto all. Thank you.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Merci beaucoup, Swami. Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Reminder.